one thing that perhaps gave him, made him more comfortable sharing the story was that it was representative of so many selfless acts that have been performed, throughout the history of our country. And so again, he didn't think that his own act was extraordinary per se, and he certainly noted that, again, there were heroic acts happening, everywhere. Certainly during the Korean War, Chosin Reservoir campaign, where my dad's action took place, just incredible acts of bravery and selfless heroism. So I think his story perhaps helped illustrate the kind of acts that were taking place all the time, and the fact that, and again, he would say, if he was asked why he did it, and you think about the circumstances, there they are, they're flying at altitude in the mountains and at the Chosin Reservoir, North Korea. It's 40 below zero at night, snow and ice. The American troops on the ground are outnumbered 10-1 by North Korean and Chinese soldiers. So just incredibly challenging, oppressive conditions, and they're the Navy pilots, flying support for the Marines on the ground, and Jesse gets shot down, and Dad decides to do a wheels-up landing, on the side of a mountain in snow and ice, and if he did process it, certainly would have realized pretty quickly that he had very little chance of survival himself. But again, his response was, he was, just doing his job, and if he hadn't done it, somebody else would have. He said that if certainly Jesse would have done the same for him, but in his mind, it was just sort of a matter of course, and that's what. That's what so many men, and certainly thereafter women, were doing, touting his own story. If part of that message was that it was a common type of act, that was, I think, a significant message.
Looking back on it now, what I remember is there was a lot of freedom after World War II, but it took a couple of years before the country settled down and resumed its earlier position. When I got my wings in the fall of 1949, we didn't know what kind of life we were going to live. Then Korea came along on the 26th of June, and it was a completely different world. The attack on South Korea by the North came as a complete surprise to anybody. We were very, very fortunate to be able to hold them off. But if we'd lost all of Korea, it would have changed the nature of everything in that part of the world, and it would have had its effect on the rest of the world, too. I think the 28th of November that the Chinese came into the war, and right immediately the troops on the ground needed every bit of support we could. With all of the troops coming down along the reservoir to get away from the overwhelming numbers of Chinese, we were sent out on an armed reconnaissance mission. And during this few days, the concentration was either on close air support or on reconnaissance. The way the squadron was organized tactically, Jesse and I flew in the same flight. This doesn't mean that neither one of us would not fly if the other one didn't fly. It's just that in the normal scheduling, Jesse and I would be in the same flight. So Jesse had had a whole year of flying experience before me, so that he was what they call a section leader, and I was his wingman. As I remember, we took off about 1:30 in the afternoon, and so it was within an hour of the time that we took off. And Jesse then called out, "I'm losing oil pressure. I think I'm losing my engine." So right away, we were looking around to see where he could land to help him while he was frantically trying to get the aircraft started or whatever. We were flying over the scrub pine, and somebody saw a space which would have been within gliding distance. Jesse went in there and without any power, because by this time his engine had quit, landed on this slope and hit the ground with such force that the aircraft fuselage buckled at the cockpit. He landed wheels up. His canopy was open before he hit the ground. As soon as he hit on the ground, the flight leader, who happened to be the squadron executive officer, shifted frequencies to call for help. So we probably put out a mayday, which we didn't hear. The flight leader called back and said, "We got an acknowledgement they're going to send a helicopter up." There was smoke blowing back from under the cowling of the aircraft, and there was great concern as to whether this might burst out in a flame before they could get the helicopters there. I could just see that airplane bursting into flame. Jesse was very much alive, and I thought it was a risk worth taking to land close to his airplane, pull him out of the cockpit, and wait for the helicopter.
You know, I also think about the Medal of Honor ceremony, and it was during that interaction when Daisy learned that Jesse was in fact alive when my dad got to him there on the mountainside. And so, as I understand it, she had been told that Jesse had died either on impact or shortly thereafter, and again, it was her understanding that Jesse was in fact no longer alive when my dad got to him. And so when my dad told Daisy that he was telling her there in the rose garden, saying how calm Jesse was and how Jesse was giving him comfort, giving my dad comfort, and I guess Daisy sort of stopped him and so what do you mean? And he further explained, and again, that's when he said, when she told him that she had been told that he was dead when my dad arrived, and he described that they were together for more than an hour, that they were talking, that they were trying to work through this really difficult situation, and the circumstances were that Jesse's leg was pinned in by the fuselage, which had buckled on impact, and so my dad couldn't physically get him out of the plane. That's when he shared with her, he said, and this is another part of the story that I just find amazing, that he told her then that Jesse's last words were, "Tell Daisy I love her." He was very fortunate to have been alive for so much of the construction period, of the ship. For him to be able to visit Bath Iron Works while the ship was under construction, meet so many of the men and women who were physically bringing the ship to life, I mean, that was incredible. And likewise, he did have a number of opportunities to meet, the men and women who were becoming, part of the crew of the ship. That too was, it sort of gave me chills just observing it from, 6 feet away, just watching those interactions. To him, young men and women who were going to be serving aboard his namesake ship. I mean, I think the whole thing was pretty surreal for him. And I mean, I certainly feel that they are embracing, his spirit and his spirit of selfless service and service to our country, service to the Navy, service to their fellow sailors, and I think all of those things do live on in the spirit of the ship.